Who's your favourite Rockstar CMO?
Oh, I can't pick. I've got lots of favourites, but I'm not going to pick favourites. I can't do that.
So, Josh, thank you for joining us today. You've been in the job for just over a year now as the CEO. How's it been?
I can't believe it's a year. My team tells me that I can't play on the new kid code anymore, and so I can't get away with much. I've definitely got some more grey in my beard, but it's been a great ride. I've really been stimulated and thrilled to be in the role, and I've been enjoying what's been happening. Like it's a really incredible industry. The people are fantastic. There's two things I said when I started back last October, that there's a lot of love out there for AANA, and that love is incredible. And I've hopefully added to a bit of that love. Everyone needs a bit more love. So there's probably two things. There's two things that I said last year when I started. The first was that I've been really blown away by how kind and generous the people are within the industry. And the second is there's a lot of love out there for AANA. And I hope I've added to a lot of love out there for AANA. We're dealing with a lot of challenges, but I'm a pretty optimistic kind of guy. I think I can turn a lot of those challenges, and we can turn a lot of those challenges into opportunities. And there's been a lot of wins, so it's been a really good ride. I've really enjoyed it.
Are there any particular moments or successes so far that stand out to you?
One of the big things that we wanted to do right from the beginning, and it was one of the stuff that we talked a lot about with the board, is be a much bigger, louder, stronger voice defending the industry. And we've definitely made a lot more noise. It's not just noise for noise sake, it's really around defending the industry, promoting the industry, protecting the self-reg system, and really talking about the issues that matter most to our members and their businesses. So I think we've made a lot of good noise. We've been advocating strongly on behalf of the industry, and that's been, I think, a really good development, really good win. There's a lot of stuff going on in self-reg at the moment. We've reviewed and just launched the children's codes a couple of weeks ago. I'm really proud of that. The team did an amazing job of launching the children's code. We're reviewing the environmental claims code at the moment, which is great to bring it in line with community standards and community expectations and international standards. And we're also going to be looking at wagering code later this year. So I think a really integral part of AANA is making sure we're setting those standards and really raising the industry standards up when it comes to the rules that we need to comply with and to be responsible advertisers. We're also throwing great events. So Reset this year was amazing. It's my first, really proud to be part of that. And we're doing some great stuff just beyond the CMOs as well, with CMOs and their teams, like the Marketing Effectiveness Masterclass we just did with Ad Council and James Herman in Sydney back in May. We're doing the next one in Melbourne next week. Really good events like that bring the thought leaders, the latest thinking around marketing to a really broad spectrum of our members, not just the CMOs, but also their teams. So there's a lot of great stuff going on.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Reset was a really good event this year. And as you mentioned, lots of stuff going on with all of the advertising codes. What's kind of your overarching vision for the AANA?
Look, we need to make sure that they're effective, they're relevant, and they're really relevant, and really respected by the government, respected by the industry, and respected by the broad range of our stakeholders. And that respect comes from making sure that we are aligned with community standards and international best practice. So that's why we do these regular reviews. That's why we're reviewing 3 of them at the moment. And it's important for us that we really seem to be relevant and effective when it comes to self-regulation, and that's really important for the whole industry. The alternative is more co-regulation, and the alternative is more regulation from government, which really means less advertising, which is not good for the industry. So we really need a strong, effective and respected self-regulatory system for the advertising industry in Australia.
How are you working to make sure that advertising kind of remains financially stable and viable as an industry?
That's a great question and a big question. Thanks, Tom. So look, we can see what's happening with the latest stats. Household spending is down for the first time in a few months. We've seen that wages is decreasing. We're getting a little bit of inflation under control a little bit, and you can just see from the RBA yesterday putting interest rates on hold that there's a pretty strong indication there that the economy is slowing. And what that means is spending is slowing, and what that means is usually less money for advertising and marketing. And so one of the things I've been saying for a long time is that now is not the time to cut marketing budgets. And our role is to really promote the marketing system and talk about how important advertising and marketing is for growth for a lot of our members and for the economy. And really, the evidence is clear, the research is clear. Those brands that invest in marketing during economic downturns really outperform their competitors when you're looking at coming out of that downturn and during the downturns as well. And so part of my role and part of AANA's role is to talk up the industry, talk up the importance of the industry, especially the finance teams and business leaders, and say now really isn't the time to cut your marketing budgets.
People have been kind of banging that drum for quite a while though. It's quite well established. There's lots of evidence around it. What are you going to do that's different to make the CFOs think that the CMOs are worthwhile and doing their job?
It's a really good question. And what it comes down to, and what all the members are saying to me, is their number one priority is marketing effectiveness and ROI. How do you prove that ROI to your finance teams and your leadership teams? So part of that is working with our members and educating them on the latest thinking when it comes to marketing effectiveness and measurement and ROI, and also talking to them about what is the language they should be using with those finance teams, and leveraging some of the expertise and some of the rock star CMOs we have, within our industry about their experience and leveraging that and sharing that information. So that's kind of how we're approaching that. It really is through the marketing effectiveness, ROI and measurement lens. How can you communicate that back to the business? So marketing is not seen as a cost center, it's an investment in growth.
Who's your favourite rockstar CMO?
Oh, I can't pick, I've got lots of favourites, but I'm not going to pick favourites, I can't do that. I'm not going to do that. I've got lots of favourites.
Now, the advertising codes have been around for kind of a quarter of a century. Do you think that self-regulation has worked in the industry? And is it actually getting more challenging as there's more societal scrutiny, I guess, over different industries?
And it's great that we're up to a quarter century, and I think that is in part demonstrates that the system has been working. But we can do this in a quicker way, more cost-effective way, and I think a more effective way than government can regulate. And it's a really good example of that is that we've reviewed 4 codes in the last 4 years. And that we can really change and move that change to align with community standards a lot faster than the government can. On the flip side to that, we also administer the independent complaints handling system through ad standards. They do about 450, I think it is. The community panel looks at about 450 complaints a year, and there's nearly 100% compliance by the industry with those decisions. Now, those stats are pretty compelling. And I think, when you look at how quickly we can adapt and the compliance by the industry with the codes and with the decisions of ad standards, I think what you're really looking at is an effective system. But you are right, there's definitely pressures and challenges on the system at the moment. There's a range of different politicians calling for advertising bans, whether it comes to unhealthy food, whether it comes to gambling. There's some pressures around the issues of privacy, the inclusion of de-identified data and a range of other different aspects when it comes to privacy, and also there's obviously environmental claims that I mentioned before. So you're seeing some pressures on the system at the moment. My job and our job at AANA and all the members is to protect and promote that system. And part of that is really getting out there and educating the broader governments and politicians and the industry and the media on the importance of the system and a really strong system we've set up. For example, Food and Bev Code is acknowledged by the world, really, as one of the strictest and best codes in the world. And it's really restrictive, including you can't advertise unhealthy food to kids at all. Now, that kind of system is not understood with a broad range of stakeholders. So part of my role is to promote and protect that system.
So we've kind of spoken about the children's advertising code before, and that's been recently refreshed. What kind of prompted that? And was the advertising of kind of fizzy drinks and vapes and Carver, which I have to say I had to Google what that was. Maybe I'm not as cool as I thought. Were they a particular problem?
Look, I think what you're looking at here is, as I said, if we're going to be relevant and effective, we need to make sure that we're consistently reviewing our codes to make sure they meet community standards. And that's what we did. It's a public review. We go out and get submissions, and we did get submissions from health authorities around things like vapes and Carver. Vapes is a great idea, a great example, because we've all seen vapes. They're clearly marketed, or you could argue that they're clearly marketed towards children. They're bright in colour, they've got cartoons on them. So we wanted to make sure that this code is strengthened and it applies to all products advertised to children, not just children's products. And so we've brought that, the big 3 changes really are, it applies to all advertising to children. We've brought in the hazardous products like vapes and Carver, and the third is we've brought in influencers. So it's just a really good example of how the industry has come together to strengthen one of our codes, to raise the bar, raise the standard when it comes to advertising to children. And it complements the Food and Bev Code that I've already mentioned around saying you can't advertise right now, you're allowed to advertise to children under 15 any occasional food, which is unhealthy food. So those kind of things mean we're developing a strong self-regulatory system around advertising to children with strong standards, and the compliance is nearly 100%. So it's pretty strong.
Environmental claims code now.
Yep. Going from one to the next way. You're hitting me with all of them.
When do you think the new code will actually go into force? And are you pleased with a lot of the sustainability initiatives that have been, promoted by advertisers so far, or can they be doing more?
The environmental claim is a really good example of where community standards or expectations have shifted. And it's not just the community, we saw a lot of regulatory activity, regulator activity from not just in Australia but around the world. And we saw a lot of international shifts. So we saw Europe move and a lot of other jurisdictions move when it came to what are the standards around environmental claims. And our members want to get it right. There's just a little bit of a lack of clarity around what those guidelines are and the standards and how they can adhere to that. So one of the first things I did when I came in as CEO is bring forward a review of the Environmental Claims Code. That's looking really good at the moment. We're hoping to release an exposure draft by the end of the year. You're the first people to know about that, so there's a scoop for you. Exposure draft is coming out before the end of the year, which will be great to get further feedback, and then hopefully we'll look for a launch earlier next year.
You heard it here first on Being CTV.
Yes.
So, and on the kind of initiatives that have been put forward by your members, are you pleased to see that they're really taking action and being proactive, or could they be doing a bit more?
It's a big question, Tom, because I'm very lucky to have a very broad membership base, from the Nestle's of the world to the Toyotas to the Woolies and the Coles, and I don't really want to make a comment on whether I think all those really incredible corporate citizens are doing a great job in sustainability. What I prefer to say is, as an industry, what I'm proud of at the moment, and there's going to be an announcement coming out about this shortly, is how the industry is coming together, the MFA, the Ad Council, IAB and the AANA.
Privacy Act, that's out for...
Hitting everyone today, Tom. He's going all.
So that's kind of out for review at the moment, and
Yep.
There are lots of big questions around transparency
Yep.
and kind of user targeting and identification. What have you been hearing from your members about their views on it and the way that any potential changes might affect their business?
Look, this is a big one. A lot of our members have been complying with actually a stricter standard with international laws for a long time. Like, we're very lucky to have Google and Meta and a range of other big international organisations as our members, and they've already been compliant with the GDPRs of the world already. And so they recognise there is some need for reform in Australia. The big problems are, I think, the practical application of what the government's proposing, and we've been talking to the government about it already, about what some of these practical applications or unintended consequences could be, particularly around unidentified data. That's pretty important for targeted advertising, and what it means to be putting stricter restrictions around that. I think that's going to be interesting. Some of the stuff around what they're doing with how you can opt out. I think the opt-out stuff is an interesting angle. I think most consumers think that when you opt out, you're not going to get any advertising at all. It means you're going to get a lot more irrelevant advertising and stuff. And how do we prevent a lot of advertising from getting to the more vulnerable people in our community? If people are opting out, for example, if people are opting out from targeted advertising and we're not collecting data on them, how do we then protect children from alcohol advertising? So there is a range of questions that are up in the air at the moment with that, and I think the government, we're working closely with the government, and a lot of the stakeholders are working closely with the government. Hopefully we'll get to an outcome that improves the outcome for privacy for most consumers in Australia, and also is good for the industry.
Yeah, I think when you look at kind of the downsides of not being able to target users with relevant ads, you only need to look at Twitter or X as an example. That seems to have really fallen by the wayside. But I think the part around protecting, children in particular from whether it's alcohol adverts or wagering adverts seems to be crucially important. Something that the regulators and the policymakers might have kind of missed.
And look, I'm not going to talk about the conversations we've been having with government, but it is something that we're very it's now public submissions about to the government around the privacy, and I think it's a really important issue. It's not just children; it's also other vulnerable Australians like problem gamblers or alcoholics. Those kind of things where at the moment we have the capacity to have their data and then prevent some of that advertising to get to them. We need to make sure we can do that in future. And if we're not collecting the data because they've opted out, we need to work on a solution that will ensure the protection of vulnerable people within our community.
Perfect. I would say should we go and get a beer, but it seems like
bit
the
early,
wrong
mate.
note to end on.
It's a bit early for that, not quite right. But thanks very much, Tom.
Cheers, Josh. Thank you very much.